Hey everyone, welcome to Clickheads. I'm Eddie the Chump, and today we're going to be doing our 1.04 patch tier list. This patch has had some very impactful changes, specifically to Viper, but we can't ignore what's happened with Raze and Brim's ultimate cost, as well as some other interactions that shape a list like this, as, to quote a good friend of mine, everything is connected. Let's begin with the very best agents in the game. S tier. Cypher. So almost all of these lists have begun with Sage, but in a shocking turn of events, I have decided to place Cypher at the top of the mountain. Why is this, you ask? Well, aside from his complete 100% pick rate at the pro level, Cypher is just too important to the info war of Valorant to place any lower. His kit just gives you so much of the raw data you need to make accurate mid-round calls and predictions on enemy movement. Playing without him can feel like playing blind. This is before we get to what his traps can actually do, which is completely wreck a push onto any site with relative ease. As the game has gotten slightly older and its player base more experienced, outplaying his traps as a direct threat has become more manageable, but they are still a factor to trade out one-to-one with utility even when you do destroy them. They're particularly useful when guarding flanks as well, with Cypher always being notified of their destruction. Cypher either gets a huge combat advantage from them or an info advantage. There is almost no downside to them whatsoever. His camera, likewise, is very difficult to outplay. Once it has seen you, it has kind of done its job, particularly if it's left on a site or mid when you've already rotated. It can inform you of a fake being sold or a lurker's flank, and when it marks someone, they cannot continue on their current path. It forces them to react. He did just get a buff as well in this patch. If you, like many others, fat finger his traps pre-round, you can now pick them back up again. That sounds small, but it isn't. Cypher just does too much to not take the top spot in our opinion. Yes, he can get overrun by massed utility if he's on his own, but many agents are like that. Not all, but many. Sage. I feel bad for moving her to number 2, but the fact is, she has a meager 98% pick rate at the pro level, and we have seen notable teams like Fabrican and TSM run Sageless at times on certain maps. However, her general power level is still crazy high. At this point, discussing how good slows are and how good her wall is seems a bit redundant, because all of us, everyone that plays Valorant, is so used to seeing her utility in almost every game. But it's her res that I can't move beyond. Resing a teammate has so many different contexts in which it's fantastic. Post-plant, on retake, mid-round, even for saving money when your economy is low, it's just so good. How could it not be? You literally bring a teammate back from the dead. We are, for the moment at least, moving away from the clog meta, but Sage is still keeping that dream alive. I actually think she's even better than people functionally make her in-game. How many Sages do you see waste both slow orbs and wall in the first 30 seconds of a round? It's a lot. Her wall takes less damage now and it doesn't last as long anyway, but it's still a massive obstacle to overcome and outplay, particularly if Sage's teammates are playing around it properly. There is one caveat though, Sage does almost nothing against ops, and with that weapon's meta value rising, Sage's weakness to it can get exposed. However, she is normally part of a core comp, with other agents around her that cover that weakness, and the next agent in S tier has become famous for doing just that. Omen. So for the first time, everyone's favourite Valorant edgelord has made it into the hallowed S tier of agents. And why is this? Well, some of his competitors have gotten worse around him, but he has also improved greatly in use and application. At the heart of this is how he uses his line of sight denial utility. Omen smokes are larger and regenerate, whereas Brim's don't, meaning they are more dexterous than some of his competitors. He is slower to deploy them, which is worse, but you as the Omen have so many more options with their use that this strength cannot be overstated. TSM ran Omen Brim with no Sage to beat T1 on Ascent. They shut down Skadoodle's op and had execute smokes still for Drone to flash out of. Omen can help his team take relevant space and have smokes late round too. This is really, really good. This also makes him one of the best agents for lurk play. When lurking, he has the utility to get somewhere relevant without being seen, like smokes, teleport. He can be somewhere an opponent cannot predict and punish them accordingly. He can also help sell fakes because his smokes have an almost entire map-like range and then exploit the rotations. He has a very powerful flash for playmaking and has access to high ground and angles that only a few others do. He's good to rifle with and he's good to op with because he can change where he is almost at whim. He can teleport over Cypher's traps on a flank, leaving the Cypher none the wiser and pull off positional fake-out shenanigans with his ult and main kit. It's perfectly possible to play low IQ with him and just do simple things like set up his team on entry, or he can be Galaxy Brain. It's up to you, he's just so flexible. All of this is why his pick rate at the pro level has skyrocketed and Brim's has fallen. Omen can be played in many ways, whereas Brim is more direct and fixed. Oh, and he's perhaps the best anti-op agent in the game. Case closed. A tier, Sova. Sova, how close you were to S tier. In all seriousness, Sova is an agent that at the pro level is very, very highly rated, but one that can struggle to make an impact in ranked. His power level is undeniable when maximized. In fact, if I were only talking about super high level play, Sova would be in the tier above, but that's not the world that we all live in. Sova's strengths are in gathering info and clearing difficult terrain. He can do so much work for your team if given the time and the space. There are literally hundreds of arrow lineups for him across all the maps, and these shift from simple entry recons to default spike plant shock dart elimination attempts. His problem, at least for the general player base, is that the pacing of his play is slower than most people are accustomed to. Players don't generally want to wait for this arrow or that arrow, but they should, because a Sova player who has taken the time to acquire the map knowledge necessary to use his kit everywhere is one of the scariest opponents possible. So many spots become non-viable as a defender, so many post-plant retakes are made possible with him learning for free where people are. It's terrifying. All that is required is patience and knowledge. His drone too is underutilized. It can be followed in as trade bait, it can mark someone for almost certain death via his ult, and it can simply recon without the need to put yourself in danger. Sova is also one of the best agents against Cypher, as his shock darts can clear common spots of traps with relative ease. Hookah window, boom, shock darted round the corner. Bathroom's door on bind, bang, gone. More people should be playing Sova, and more teams should acknowledge that if you give him the time and the space, he can make your job 1000% easier. He's also one of the better agents against Viper's new power level in patch 1.04. His recon arrow will mark her inside of the ult if both her and the arrow are inside, as will his drone if you fly it in, and when sighted, you can see her from outside her ult. If Viper's level is much higher than before, which we suspect might be the case, then you're going to want a Sova to have counterplay options. Phoenix. I'm not going to lie, Phoenix is here because he's English and so am I. Alright, that's not why, but I do love him for that as well. Phoenix in patch 1.04 is arguably going to be stronger because of Viper's likely rise in popularity. This is because his flash is amazing when used through or out of line of sight utility. In Frido's video concerning drone, he showed how powerful Curveball could be from inside a smoke or from behind a wall. If Viper is going to rise in use and her wall is going to be more of a factor on executes and defense and for a longer amount of time, using Phoenix's Curveball in this way gets even more potent. Phoenix has interesting interactions with all of the controllers, both in combination with and as adversaries, and his ult, Run It Back, might be one of the best answers to the new massively buffed Viper's Pit, as when inside, players can't mark her on the minimap like they used to. If she pops that ult on a spike to deny a retake and you as the Phoenix have Run It Back, this is a great potential use for it. Not many agents will fare well in that poison cloud, but trading out and ulting Phoenix might be your best bet. Don't forget, he can cover up space too with his wall, denying her near sight advantage. This goes for all the controllers, not just her, and it's a part of his kit that many players use just for healing, which is a shame. Phoenix attacks space very well, and when that is at a premium, his stock rises. In a conventionally slow and set meta, which because of Viper's buffs might be getting even slower, Phoenix is one of the only agents with enough explosiveness in his kit to outplay it. The fire rises. Brimstone. Alright Brimdad, what are you doing down here in only A tier? Well, Omen is a thing, and this old dog doesn't learn new tricks. Brim is a very safe agent. He doesn't have a lot of sharp edges. He also caught an ultimate nerf in patch 1.04, so it's reasonable for him to have fallen a few places. Viper, although less dexterous than Brim, might start to replace him if the map you're playing leans into her strengths: line of sight denial, set play, and key ground control. I traditionally think of maps like Split and Bind, where she has already played a bit but in patch 1.04 you might want her ahead of Brim. The problem with Brim is, what would you consider his main strengths? Set play executes and post plant is what I figure. Well, he's still good at those for sure. His ult, despite costing more in this patch, can still get free kills and defend a planted spike very well. You'll just have it less often. His molly is still great in that scenario as well, and his boost pack just got a little bit better in that context. Some people are talking about it being a nerf, that it doesn't show enemies the radius anymore, as you can't use it to fake where you are, but now you can just hide and use it in a spot where you do want someone to peek you and just melt them, and it won't boost enemies if they walk into it, which was annoying. I always rated that ability a little bit higher than others might, especially on force rounds, where you can make an aggressive play with worse guns. The pack's boost could really equalize weapon disadvantages there, but that's a small point of concern. Brim's fall in the tiers has a lot to do with Omen's rise. You don't want to use Brim smokes for simple anti-op line of sight denial, as you're limited in resources, so I wouldn't pick him just for that. If you're only going to pick one controller, then it's hard to argue Omen doesn't deserve that spot in this patch. Even if you are running two, Viper might beat Brim out on the right map. He's still easy to play and not at all useless, which is why he's not lower, but this stance might change with more patch experience. Raze. Everyone hates playing against Raze, and that's for good reason. Her kit can be obnoxious and hard to play around, particularly her ult. In patch 1.04, Showstopper costs 1 more point, so thankfully you'll have to get rocketed maybe once or twice less a game. For Raze, her place is a little higher than last time despite this, simply because at low levels she farms, and at the pro levels she's a vital piece on specific maps. She's fantastic on Split, as an example, where her kit is very scary, particularly on low buy rounds where armor is scarce or non-existent, and there are many agents in a similar place to Raze, in that at the top level they are plug-and-play options that are picked based on their map-specific advantages. I don't actually think there is a bad agent in Valorant, it's just that some have more context in which they're useful. Raze in this patch is the definition of being middle tier with this consideration. How will she fare against the new Viper, for example? Her boombot will spot Viper if it's in the cloud with her and it has line of sight. If she or it are outside the ult and the line of sight is broken, then it won't. She has more time to play around this kind of utility with a 12-second buff to the cloud's integrity once Viper is outside, but the boombot is better than a lot of other agents' kit in this scenario outside of Sova Recon and Phoenix's ult. Her ult can also be pretty good as well. Her blast packs can flush Viper out, and she can use her movement tools to evade the new decay and smoke up time, but the rest of her team might struggle to follow her. The Raze Viper matchup looks pretty good for Raze because it's only 1 of 11, soon to be 12, so it's not enough to place her higher because it's still too soon to tell how great Viper might be or not. Jett. In Jett's case, her higher placing than others is almost in reverse of how good she is at the pro level. There, she's very hard to optimize, with even famous Jett players like Wardell swapping onto agents like Sova because he just has more to offer their teams. In ranked, it's a different story. Jett is and remains a very strong agent if you're the kind of player with the skills to get the most out of her. She bullies disorganized teams with her fragging power and playmaking skill set, and her interactions with a lot of the cast are largely unchanged. She's still capable of ruining Cypher's traps with her dash, and she can still take angles that devastate even the best Brim sight smoke setups. Raze's ult nerf means that she just dies less often to it like everybody else, but does she do anything special against the new Viper? Well, just like Raze, her mobility means that she can bypass a lot of the decay and wall changes with relative ease. If Jett uses her smoke in Viper's pit, the Viper won't be able to see her crossing or playing in this smoke within a smoke. She will of course be subject to the same health decay if she does this, but you might find yourself having to make this play, and you'll be thankful that you have at least this option, as Viper's near sight in her ult is better now. Jett is a pick for the mechanically gifted and remains so in patch 1.04. B tier, Viper. Right, I'm going to say this now so people don't get upset. Viper could be higher, we just don't know for sure how all of her interactions will work long term. She has been buffed significantly twice in a row, and although she might not be the best agent overall, she might have risen in the controller meta enough to displace Brim in certain scenarios. The reason for that, and why she's not higher on this list, is that she's a sharper agent by nature than Brim is. She still can't move her wall. Once she commits, that's it. What she does do though, she now does much better than before. One of the fallacies of tier list videos like this is that all the agents have to be compared to all the others as a group, when in reality that's not really how it works. Is Viper as good at entry as Phoenix? No, obviously, but she doesn't have to be. Can she execute and control space better than Brim and Omen? Well, that question is more debatable. Specifically, for the top levels of the game, there are core roles that teams need to fill with utility to get anything done. Viper could perform one of those roles in her buff state. She's always been good at space control with her one-ways that can last an entire round because you can turn them on and off, and she has her wall for executes and 2 mollies that are way better than people give them credit for. But to me, it's the decay changes that are really key. A lot of smokes in Valorant you're kind of okay with walking through, especially if you have a flash to explode out with, because the real threat is the enemy watching the smoke while you're unsighted, not the smoke itself. Viper smoke is an actual damage threat, and the decay debuff lasting longer once you are through it is significant. If you burst out of her smoke, all of the players that did are subject to that decay, which in turn makes them easier to kill. If there was a molly in that smoke as well, you are very, very weak to any incoming damage. Viper's 1.04 state is a bit of a throwback to the clog meta. She kind of becomes a one-woman clog machine. You will not want to push her if she's prepared for you. The fuel buffs also come into play. Viper is more resistant to fakes than other controller agents, and this is because she can control when her walls and smokes are up and when they are not. If at the top level of play you try and sell a fake on a Viper, she will have fuel for when you come back. If Omen and Brim have used their stuff initially and you've drawn it out of them, they are kind of vulnerable. Viper does not have that weakness. She doesn't have as much choice of moving her utility as the others do, but she can mess with you in terms of always having it ready when needed. Especially now the fuel consumption of using both the smoke and the wall at the same time has been drastically buffed. It is possible that she becomes a very important but map dependent pick, where she's a must pick on one and irrelevant on another at the pro level. In ranked, we expect her to be undervalued for a bit while people realise her new strengths, not least of all is the changes that her ult got. Let's just be real for a moment. Viper's Pit has been a joke for a long time, but a joke it is no longer. Post-plant, it's gonna be killer. No minimap, no putting her on the radar when you see her in the ult, it is much better. And she can play in and out of it much better since she has 12 seconds of cloud integrity instead of 5. It's gonna be very hard to dislodge her. It does still have some of the same weaknesses. Multiple players trading you out will be difficult to deal with. Sova can recon you inside the cloud, Phoenix can ult at you, Raze's boombot will reveal your position if you're both in the cloud, etc. But overall, it's way better. Viper isn't the top of the meta suddenly, but she will definitely have her place, maybe at Brim's expense. Reyna are now my favourite agent. She's still low tier, but not at the bottom this time. Reyna is a victim of her nature. She's win more, she's a glass cannon. If you get rolling, she feels overpowered. If not, then she does virtually nothing. What is important for this patch though, is that her flash remains one of the most potent in the game. It's perhaps better against ops than any other, having extreme range and even blinds Viper in her ult if both are inside the cloud. Another thing that makes her useful against Viper is that Reyna's ult Empress gives her the same highlight near sight as Viper has inside her ult, meaning in that situation they are even in a duel aside from health. You will see each other at exactly the same range. This could be a key interaction if Viper's power level becomes as high as we think it could be. She also doesn't care as much about decay as other agents because she has access to self-healing if she wins a duel. I love playing her, and the bug that meant that you had to have the orb on screen to fully heal is now gone, so she's back to her 1.02 level as far as that goes. Reyna will sadly always be low on a tier list because none of what she does is guaranteed, but if you can get her to work, she can be very potent. That's also why EU pros tend to pick her a bit more as well. She does have her place. Breach. Breach, it's time for you to prop up the tier list for a change. So why have we placed Breach so low? Well, as I've mentioned, there isn't really a bad agent in the game. In the right places and played in the right way, Breach can do work. But he does suffer in comparison, specifically where his power would otherwise come from. His flash is the most awkward and easy to outplay flash in the game. Yes, if it hits you, you are about as useful as Stevie Wonder. It lasts forever. However, it is too telegraphed. It's too easy to misplace, and it's too easy for a player to avoid. In comparison to Phoenix, whose flash is very simple and direct, you know that if you huddle in a smoke and throw curveball out, it's gonna hit. With Breach, it's much harder to flash out of smokes like that because you're not always sure if the surface it's detonating off is at the right angle to actually hit anything. All his utility is like this, by the way. In this meta where the op is really good, teams need line of sight and flash utility to deal with them. Breach has only one of those and other agents have better flashes. His stun doesn't do much unless you're really set up to take advantage, and even his ult is easy to track and counter because 1, you can see on the scoreboard when players have their ult, and 2, it's fairly easy to know where a Breach will likely want to use it. Breach has his ult, watch out mid of split, just as an example. It's also awkward to follow up. Everything he does hits his own team if they're in front of it, his ult, his stun, his flash, everything. He is just hard to use properly, which is why his pick rate has been falling dramatically. Now, in the recent EU Ignition series, he did get played more, but that's because Scream basically mained him for Fish 123. In Ranked, he's very rare, precisely because he's hard to play and other more powerful options are not by comparison. Say it with me, everybody, Breach needs mad buffs. And that's about it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this tier list video. Let me know what you think of our take on patch 1.04. Do you agree Viper is now a sleeping giant on the right maps, or is it more buffs needed? Leave a comment down below. If you like the content on this channel, please hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you get notified when we upload. Also, check out our Facebook stream. We are no-lifing Valorant over there, and it would be great to see some of you in the chat. Until next time.